They may have done that album while high on LSD. I could be wrong though, or
Wow.
possibly acid, one of those drugs.
Maybe I should do a podcast episode while on LSD.
Yeah.
Have you ever written an article while on
No,
LSD?
no. I...
Kids, don't try this at home.
I'm a writer. I know dialogue.
That's a fountain of conversation, man. That's a geyser.
Interesting.
Interesting. Yes, provocative.
Oh, Daddy, stand back, man. Woo! Rock and roll!
Welcome to Booked on Rock, the podcast for those about to read and rock. Find the podcast at bookedonrock.com. You can find every episode of Booked on Rock there, along with links to your favorite listening platforms, exclusive videos, blogs, links to all of the social media sites, and the latest rock book releases. Another chapter in the Dialogue series, a chill and chat with authors, fellow podcasters, musicians, and more. And we have author Greg Prato back on the podcast. He is the author of several books and has written for Songfacts, Consequence of Sound, Guitar World, Vintage Guitar, Louder, among others. He's been a great supporter of the Booked on Rock podcast, crediting the show in many articles he's written for Ultimate Guitar. So as a thank you to Greg, I asked him to come on and talk about the books he released in 2023. We also talk about Queen, Van Halen, Led Zeppelin, Kiss, Lemmy from Motorhead, and Rush. And here's a question for you. If you had to pick 10 albums you just could not live without, what would they be? Go to the show notes page or just go to bookedonrock.com. You can find links to the Booked on Rock Facebook, Instagram, and X pages and share your top 10 list. You can also do it by email at thebookedonrockpodcast@gmail.com. Greg and I come up with our top 10 list in this episode, so let's get to it. We've got songs that we discuss in this episode on the show notes page. Greg Prato, welcome back to the podcast.
Hello, Eric. How you doing?
I wanted to have you come back on to talk about your books that came out in 2023, and particularly that last one you came out with, which is such a great conversation starter, 50 Rock Lists and Surprise Twists. But before we start getting into the books, I figured I'd bring up some topics, some of the biggest stories in classic rock in 2023, right? And get your thoughts on these. In 2020, you released the book, A Rock and Rollin' Man, Bon Scott Remembered. In 2023, AC/DC returned to the stage for the first time in 7 years in October for the Power Trip Festival. This marked the return of singer Brian Johnson. He was replaced by Axl Rose, as you know, in the middle of the tour in 2016 due to hearing problems. I saw a few clips on YouTube. Brian was struggling on some songs like Thunderstruck, but he did sound good on Let There Be Rock. What did you think of the performance?
Well, I was shocked a few years back how well actually Axl sounded, especially singing Bon Scott material. I thought he did a very good job. And it's funny because I'm not necessarily the biggest fan of Axl Rose or his singing. I mean, early Guns N' Roses, I think he sounds fine, but I'm not the biggest fan. Yeah, I mean, there's absolutely nothing. I don't take it away from people that are big Guns N' Roses fans. They're just not really my cup of tea. But yeah, I mean, I am a huge AC/DC fan though, and I absolutely love Bon Scott, and I also even love Brian Johnson too. It's funny because like with Van Halen, like we've discussed in the past, I'm really just a David Lee Roth era fan. I really never liked the Sammy Hagar era with Van Halen, which is funny because I love Montrose with Sammy Hagar, but just the whole Van Hagar thing, I was never a big fan of. Like, so that to me is it's a very clear line, Van Halen with David Lee Roth, Van Halen with Sammy Hagar. Whereas AC/DC with Bon Scott and Brian Johnson, I think fans appreciate Brian Johnson a lot more because without Brian Johnson, AC/DC would have just probably died and they wouldn't have continued on after Bon Scott passed away. So it's a little bit different. And honestly, I think, you can't argue with how great Back in Black is. So
one of the greatest of all time.
Yeah. So to make a long story short, I'd say as long as Angus Young is alive and willing to do it and Brian Johnson can still sing, they should just keep going, is what I think they should do.
Yeah, I say the same. And speaking of Back in Black, it is on a particular list that we're gonna talk about later. I threw out that question to you to come up with a certain top 10 list, so we'll get to that. Yes. But Back in Black's on there. Now, you mentioned Sammy with Van Halen, and another big story in 2023 was Sammy Hagar announcing the Best of All Worlds tour with Michael Anthony on bass, Jason Bonham on drums, Joe Satriani on guitar. It's going to be mostly Van Halen songs in the set list, including Dave era songs, which Mikey's going to sing, which is going to be cool. and they appeared on Howard Stern, as you know, and they played some Van Halen songs. And Satch took some hits for his performance on there. It sounded
Right.
rough on a few songs,
Hmm.
but my thought is let's make the final determination when the tour starts, because there's still a lot of time left before that tour starts. And we've heard Satriani talk about it. There wasn't any rehearsal for it. And even today, actually, there was an article just put up on the Van Halen news desk of how he's having someone build a specific amp just to get the sound of Eddie. So I think he's going to be just fine when the tour starts. What did you think of the Stern performance, and what do you expect from Joe and the band this summer?
I think it's going to be fine. And it seems like really the thing that most people had a problem with was when he was told on the spot to play the intro to the song Mean Street, and he kind of fumbled it a little bit. But I don't understand why people don't realize he obviously didn't practice it. So it's like, if you hand him a guitar and say, hey, play me, I don't know, just like any song, if he's not familiar with it, he's not necessarily going to play it note for note. And that's obviously a bit of a tricky, uncommon thing, that song. And it's also not Van Halen's like most best known type song. It's different if you handed him a guitar and say, hey, play me the chords to the song Panama. I'm sure he could figure that out. Whereas the beginning to that song, which I absolutely love the intro to Mean Street and the actual song Mean Street, but yeah, that to me, I was surprised people made such a huge deal about that. I saw that right. I remember hearing it or watching it and thinking, like, oh, he didn't play it that well, but it didn't really affect me that much because I knew it was just off the cuff, on the spot type thing. So I think Satch will do great playing the parts of Eddie Van Halen this coming summer.
Kiss, let's talk about that. The big event. I think the
Oh, yeah.
last big event in classic rock of the year,
Right.
2023, of course, was that, I don't know, so-called last show. I think it is the last show by the band. It's like the live actual band. But and you wrote a great book, 2019, Take It Off, Kiss, Truly Unmasked, which covers the band's work from the 80s, which they really didn't cover much of the 80s era on those tours. But they threw in a few here and there. But talk about the final show at Madison Square Garden, December 2nd, before we get to the avatars. What did you think of the final show?
Yeah, I thought the ball was fumbled, that they did not have Bruce Kulick come out. They should have at the very least done that. And they were like, oh, the excuse was, well, they're all wearing platform shoes. And, what is Bruce Kulick going to come out and look like he's 3 feet tall? Well, that's a big load of bullshit because Joe Perry once came out and played Strutter with them about 20 years ago, and Aerosmith and Kiss were touring together. And he came out playing, I think he was wearing Paul Stanley's platform shoes. So you could just have Bruce Kulick come out just wearing black platform shoes, and he could have done a couple of songs as an encore. That would have been fine. I mean, the truth of the matter is they always say the excuse like, oh, when Ace and Peter were in the band during the last reunion, during the reunion with them, we couldn't really change the set list around because those guys just couldn't play it. But then on Ace Frehley's tours, he plays deep cuts and stuff, which admittedly he doesn't sing or doesn't sound as good, like now as he did when he was younger. But I recently interviewed Ace for the website called Ultimate Guitar, and he was honest. He said, as you get older, we can't play things perfectly anymore, but we can at least, get it, it's sounding somewhat like it is. But just to make a long story short, they use the excuse like, oh, we can't have those guys up. I remember Paul Stanley said that obnoxious thing that what Kiss would sound like piss or something like that. I think he said that when he was a guest on Stern. Yeah, which that to me was, because, look, I am a Kiss fan, but, I think Paul Stanley would be the first to admit that his singing isn't as good as it used to be. I'm not one of these people that like tear him apart. Like I remember like 10 years ago, people were just ripping him a new asshole, which, to me, you have to show some kind of fucking respect to the guy after all he's accomplished.
Had one of the greatest voices
I know.
in the business right up through,
he's one of the most underrated rock vocalists, I think, Paul Stanley.
Yep.
Especially the 70s. And even though I don't listen too much to the 80s, even though I wrote a book about the 80s, his singing in the 80s was really, really great. Like he would sing high perfectly. And I'm not talking about just on record, but even if you hear him live on like the Crazy Nights tour and stuff like that,
and that album,
vocals are really impressive.
That album might be his best vocally. Yeah, Crazy Nights. Yeah, the thing is, the show didn't have the feeling of finality to it. And
it was just like any other show on the tour, pretty much, right?
Yeah, and we know why when we get to the end. It's just a promotion for the avatars. But Because I'm thinking you have, what was it, 3 years? The tour started 3 years ago, I think.
I think so, 3 or 4, possibly even 4 years ago, because yeah, they didn't play for almost a year because of COVID. So I think it was maybe 4 years ago.
So you have all that time to plan that final show, and you're
Right. Yeah.
thinking,
I don't know.
do some kind
I
of a roll
actually,
call. Thanks to all the guys that were here. Maybe a roll
yeah.
call on the big screen. You don't have to necessarily have
Yeah.
them there, but
Right.
at least acknowledge them. You know.
Bruce Kulick has been doing a lot of interviews lately, and he's been saying some very interesting things. You know, I guess because now since Kiss is over, he can finally speak his mind and everything.
Yep. Yep.
And one thing he's saying that he said, which is interesting, is he just came right out and said that I don't think Doc McGee has any. I forget the exact quote, but just that Doc McGee doesn't look at the non-makeup era of Kiss as being worthwhile or have any kind of value. Which I mean, I do agree that to me, I mean, honestly, I really am the Kiss I listen to the most is really the '70s Kiss, and that's my favorite lineup, and I think that was the most groundbreaking and everything. But you know, to really, you could have paid a little more, especially in the '80s. Without the '80s, Kiss would have died because in '81, '82, Kiss was at an all-time low with popularity. It wasn't until after they took off their makeup that their career actually got rekindled and then they were on MTV and on the covers of magazines. That's what my book, Take It Off, kind of focuses on. And Bruce Kulick was a huge part of that. He's a very underrated guitarist. I mean, that to me was some of the best parts of non-makeup era Kiss was what Bruce and also the late great Eric Carr brought to the band.
Absolutely. I'm every bit the fan of the '80s Kiss as I am of the '70s Kiss. I think I love it just as much, and I wish they would have gotten some acknowledgement on that. But again, we know when we hear Paul say, "Well, this is the end of one road, the start of another," and then they play the promo for the avatars, like, "Oh, okay, so this is basically like an advertisement for the next step."
Right.
And so I think that was disappointing because I remember Gene saying he's going to shed a tear on that last show, and that's what I was hoping to have that moment. You know, Gene says something emotional or something that would have made it feel final. But now let's get to the Avatar thing. So they do promote the Avatar, but it's not coming until 2027. So there's
something like that. Yeah, yeah.
Right.
I forget the year, but yeah, because they say that they want to get it to look better, I think, or something like that.
Right. So I'm holding out on this, my opinion,
but then I also read a quote from Gene Simmons. He claims that they're sinking like $200 million into this or something.
Right.
Did you hear about this?
Yes.
Which that shows what's so screwed up about our society. I mean, why don't you take the $200 million and put it into help someone, try to solve some problem in the world rather than try to get the Kiss avatars to look better, right? I mean, why don't you put that towards helping the homeless or cancer research or something. Like that? Feeding the people who don't have food. I mean, I just don't understand.
Instead, it's going into the avatars. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, really, we need better looking Kiss avatars. That $200 million. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, as I'm a huge Kiss fan, and so I think I'm considering going to this. I'm just waiting to see what they do with it, because there's still some time for it to develop. But if it works, that's kind of like, what does it do for the music business? That they become ahead of their time, or it just falls flat. And
well, I mean, we're already in the whole like hologram thing. In fact, I saw the Dio hologram about four or 5 years ago now. At this
what
point,
did you think of it?
I mean, it was, like I can understand that they want to get the music of Dio out there and everything, but it was, kind of goofy to be honest. I mean, their hearts were definitely in the right place, but it was a little different that it was Dio on like a screen and then they had actual live musicians playing. So that's like a little different than when was it the Tupac hologram? I think was the first ever hologram at Coachella where it's just him.
Was it, or was it Michael Jackson? I'm not sure.
I don't know who it was.
Where was the show that you saw? Was it on the East Coast here?
Yes, it was at the Paramount in Huntington.
Wow, Huntington, New York.
Huntington, New York, yeah. And yeah, it was good. Well, it was like again, it was kind of a goof that you see. It's like you're watching a TV screen with. Yeah, but then again, I've been to some shows where the seats are so horrible that it's all you're doing is pretty much watching either the projection screen or you're just looking at the stage, which little tiny ant people. So I don't know. I mean, is there really much a difference between that and seeing a hologram up close? I don't know.
Yeah. Did they do that? Was that like a full on tour? Like they were going
That
from
was, I
city to
believe, a full
city?
on tour. Yeah,
And that
that
was,
was.
I think, the Ronnie's widow that was,
It was, yeah,
yeah.
Wendy Dio, yeah. Because I
Okay.
actually interviewed her around that time, and again, like I know from her that like her heart was in the right place, and it wasn't, like she was just trying just to keep his music alive. And that said, there was a friend of mine who was going to that show who brought his two kids, and he was telling me how happy he was that he had this opportunity because he always told his kids that when you're a little bit older, we will go see Dio live, and sadly, Ronnie James Dio died before they could go. So this was at least an opportunity for him to bring his two kids to see that show. So I mean, from that point, that's actually worthwhile.
The Booked on Rock podcast will be back after this. Talking with author Greg Prato. In 2023, you released the book Lanigan, and you were on the podcast to talk about that one. And this is on the life and career of Mark Lanigan of Screaming Trees, Queens of the Stone Age, and he was a solo artist. And you also released the 100 Greatest Songs of Heavy Metal, and you give your thoughts on various rock lists that appear on websites or magazines. That's a great book. The same on your book, The 100 Greatest Songs of Punk Rock, and that was also released in 2023.
Those two books, the 200 lists, those are Kindle only books.
Kindle only, okay.
Kindle only.
So people can go to Amazon to get
Yeah,
that.
Amazon.
I had you on to talk about another 2023 book, I Love Grunge, Grunge is Dead Outtakes, which is a follow-up to one of your best-known and most successful books, which came out back in 2009.
Grunge is Dead.
Grunge is Dead. You also released an updated, expanded edition of your book on the New York Jets called Butt Fumbles, Fake Spikes, Mud Bowls, and Heidi Games, the top 100 debacles of the New York Jets. Updated and expanded, and it's the Torn Achilles Tendon edition.
I could not believe what I was watching in that first game of the season. And I remember it was during halftime. I was sitting with my friends and I said, you know what? I have to now do an updated version of this book and add what I just saw into this book. And hence
Aaron Rodgers.
I had to put it in there. I don't really believe so much in like superstitions, but I do kind of believe not so much in curses with sports franchises, but there are definitely sports franchises that are run so poorly that it does kind of then like I can't really even put it's just like bad mojo starts surrounding and the Jets just I don't know what it is with them just year after year after year just when you think they may be turning a corner or something is going their way just what is it Murphy's Law whatever will go wrong whatever can go wrong will go wrong.
All right, so that gets us caught up on all but one book from 2023. We want to talk about the most recent one that came out. I think it was October or November. 50 Rock Lists and Surprise Twists. So this is just it's a great book it's a conversation starter at parties, that's for sure. How did you get the idea?
Or it's a very good bathroom book, right?
It's a good bathroom book, yes.
There you go.
How did you get the idea for this one?
I've done a lot of lists over the years for a bunch of sites and magazines. Like I write for a wide variety of places. So I just started compiling them all together. And then I also realized I had a pretty good amount of them. So I said, if I add a few new ones, I could bring the number up to 50. So I added some exclusive lists that have never been published before for this book. And it covers a pretty good amount of ground. Pretty sure from the 60s up to probably the 90s are covered because that's really, I don't know, like when you hit a certain age, I don't know, music kind of just cuts off. I mean, not music, but just what you're willing to listen to or accept, or just music that you think is as good as what you grew up listening to.
It's so true.
And so I don't know. It's kind of like as the years went on, just for some reason, slowly, I stopped bringing more new bands in that I think are really unique or interesting and don't just sound like every other band. So I kind of wonder sometimes, like when I was younger and listening to, listening to Metallica Master of Puppets for the first time, if I played that for someone older, would they have been like, oh, this sounds like everything else? Probably not, right?
I think about that a lot. I think that we were at the tail end of rock's run, which was from basically, I don't know, you could go back to the Buddy Holly days. So you could say maybe mid to late 50s to mid 90s, and then things just went to shit.
Yeah, I mean,
it just sucks. I mean, there's good stuff that's come out since then. I can't say there's absolutely nothing, but
no, because I would say from like the mid '90s into the early 2000s, I was really into Radiohead for a while. In the late '90s, I still am into the band Queens of the Stone Age, Eagles of Death Metal. I went through a brief period of loving the Strokes. I haven't listened to them though in years. I wonder if I heard them again, what I would think of them. But I really liked their first album a lot. I thought they were going to be the next. But then again, they are pretty big. Just I haven't listened to them in a long,
But
long
we're
time.
far from that point where rock bands were in the top 40, where rock and roll songs were
right.
in the top,
Right.
it's just, I hate to say it. I don't see it's ever going to happen again. I think it's done. And what happens when you have all of these artists and bands who no longer tour and they pass away? What does that leave us with, the rock fans? I don't know.
We have to just, I guess we have to listen to our old albums and just be thankful that we have them, right?
Let's get to some of the lists in the book. Here's a good one. 5 best Queen songs not sung by Freddie. Pick any one of these if you remember from the book and tell us why you're a fan.
I believe wasn't Someday One Day one of the selections off of Queen 2 sung by Brian May.
I'm surprised I'm in Love with My Car was not in there.
Yeah. That song, right? I have to admit, I was never a big fan of. I mean, musically it's okay, but lyrically that song I think just falls flat personally. Yeah, I think Brian May has a very underrated lead, but then again, also Roger Taylor was a great singer too.
Yep.
That's what made Queen so good, is with the harmony vocals. They had 3 guys that could have been lead singers, but Freddie Mercury, of course, is on a whole other level. So, but I mean, but in just about almost any other band, Brian May and Roger Taylor would have been a great lead vocalist. So,
you follow with the top 15 greatest Freddie Mercury performances. They come with some interesting backstories, which is cool here. Can you tell the one behind their performance of Under Pressure on Saturday Night Live, 1982?
Yes. Well, supposedly what happened was Queen's tour ended. I don't think I even put this in the book. Queen's tour ended 1 week before they got a slot for Saturday Night Live. So they had to just sit in the United States for a whole extra week after the tour ended just to play this one performance. And they did it. But the story goes that the night before the performance, Freddie Mercury got into an argument with his boyfriend, a screaming match or something, and he lost his voice, and they thought that he may not be able to sing, or if he was going to sing, it was going to sound crappy. But if you listen to it, he sounds fine. So he was able to pull it off like a true professional.
Is that on YouTube? Because a lot of times they pull. NBC
it is on YouTube. You know where it is? Saturday Night Live is pretty strict, so I think they have the audio with just a picture, and then they have the video, but the video is like on an angle or something. I think that's how you get away with it. Type thing.
Yeah. So interestingly, you write, sadly, Queen's SNL appearance would prove to be the band's last ever live performance on U.S. soil with Freddie as their frontman.
Yes.
So that was
it was the Hot Space album, which was their worst album. Was their last album they ever toured the U.S. with. Yeah, which is kind of sad that they went out on their worst album with the tour. But the actual tour was great if you watch live footage, and they put out a live album from that tour a few years back called Queen on Fire Live at the Bowl, which is fantastic, and which was a big mistake on their part. The Hot Space material, which was very dance oriented, live is much more hard rock sounding and much more, it's like hard rock funk, whereas the album is just very flat, disco-y, no energy, it's very low energy. So they could have done a dance rock merger and made it heavy and good, like Trampled Underfoot by, of course, Led Zeppelin. That's like a funk rock hybrid that I think works really, really well. So they could have done something like that. But
do you remember it? Sometimes it's been a while since authors write these books, so they forget. Who was the host of SNL? You have it in the book.
I'm going to guess Chevy Chase.
You got it.
Chevy. I got it. There we go.
Chevy, 1982. Now I wonder, what movie was he promoting? 1982.
82. Well, 81 would have been Modern Problems, which is one of my favorite cinematic masterpieces.
You remember? Isn't that the one where? Is that the one where
he has mental abilities to make things move?
Yes. Yes. Oh my God! Yes. You might be the only person I know that remembers that movie, because that was like in between his hits. It was like kind of
because it was a dud. In 1983 would have been The First Vacation.
Yeah.
So September 82 would have been a few months before that.
10 unexpectedly great guitar solos. Everyone talks about the killer sax work on Jerry Rafferty's Baker Street. You highlight the solo. Who is on that solo, and what led you to putting it on the list?
Yes, not too many people know this, but Scott Baio from the TV show Happy Days plays the guitar solo. Did you know that?
Yeah,
I just want to make sure that you're fully paying attention. I just want to make sure you're fully paying attention to what I'm saying. I'm going to let you tell everyone who the guitarist is. Go ahead.
Yes, let's look it up. Hold on, let's
Look it
see.
up because I'll be honest, it's not someone that I know off the top of my head because it isn't like a
That's
well-known
great.
session guy.
Well,
But
you never know because Chevy was in a pre-Steely Dan
you're right.
band.
Absolutely, you're right.
So
Absolutely, yeah. He
we
was with the
can't.
drummer, right? If I'm
He
not mistaken.
was. He was.
That
They
was
weren't
the-
called Steely Dan. They were called something else, I think.
Oh, okay.
At
Yeah.
Bard College.
Right. Right.
Yeah, Hugh Burns,
There you go.
a Scottish
Yeah.
chap, as you right, by the name of Hugh Burns. Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, he's played.
Great
He
solo.
played with Paul McCartney, Jack Bruce, Pet
Oh,
Shop
okay, yeah.
Boys. Oh, he's also on "Careless Whisper," which is another song,
Okay.
as you know, relied heavily on saxophone.
Yes.
Cool. You do have "Let's Dance" in there too, and I think
Stevie
it's
Ray Vaughan, of
amazing.
course, yeah.
People there are people who don't know Stevie Ray Vaughan's on that
Mm. And
album.
then I think I have your favorite guitarist on that list as well, with a very obvious guest, right?
Yes, Eddie,
Yeah.
beat it. Yep.
Yeah.
25 greatest rock guitar albums of 1982. That was a great year.
That was
one of my
when it came to metal.
Yes. One of my favorite UFO songs, The Writer, from
Yes.
the Mechanics album. This album doesn't include Michael Schenker on guitar. It's Paul Chapman.
Yes.
You include that album at number 23. All the way up at number 3 is the lone album from the David Lee Roth Years of Van Halen that takes any heat, and that would be Diver Down. And you say, which I agree, the originals are worth the price of the album, even if you're not a fan of the covers, right?
Although I think Where Have All the Good Times Gone is a great cover. I think that's fantastic.
Which
I
a
love
lot of
that.
people didn't even
But,
know because it's kind of an unknown Kinks song.
Right.
But the originals on that album kick ass.
The only song I don't like on that album is the cover of Dancing in the Street. That's the only one I just don't like that. Yeah.
So
I don't
many
know.
people
song
say that,
never
and
ever-
I love it. I would say that of Pretty Woman. When I hear Pretty Woman, it does nothing for me. And
honestly, not. You know what's funny is I like Intruder more than I like actually Pretty
Yeah.
Woman.
Which, do you know why they made that?
Yes, for the whole video.
Yes.
Because the video was on. Which
The
now,
video was
if
so
I could
long,
ask-
they had to insert something to.
Which now, let me actually pick your brain about
Yeah.
something. What I don't understand is Eddie Van Halen did instrumentals throughout Van Halen with little guitar interludes and stuff, and they're always phenomenal. Whether it be the beginning of Girl Gone Bad, that beginning is fantastic. I love the beginning of Intruder. I love Saturday Afternoon in the Park. I love Spanish Fly, Eruption. Why the hell would Eddie Van Halen not have done in his lifetime a instrumental solo album? Those songs I just mentioned are strong enough on their own that they would have kept the attention of people that aren't guitar players, just because the melodies and stuff, and it's just interesting music. And it's also a wide variety of music as well. So I don't know why, especially during those years where they weren't getting along with Sammy or Dave, just him and Michael Anthony and Alex Van Halen should have just done a very interesting all instrumental. I don't understand why.
Yes, I agree. And I'm going to tell you, there's one song, because you say you're not a big Sammy era fan, but there's an instrumental on Balance, and it's called Balance. The pronunciation is impossible.
Yeah, it's titled after some kind of dinosaur or something like that.
Balachutherium. Balachutherium. There you go. If I say it enough times, I'll get it down. But yeah, so I think that Eddie, it must have crossed his mind. I can only assume that he felt that he would have gotten resistance from a commercial standpoint, that it wouldn't sell as like an album with a singer. See, because the thing is, he wrote, like even Michael Anthony said, he really wrote songs like they were instrumentals anyway.
Right. Yeah,
and
it's true.
you know, then Sammy and Dave would come in and put the lyrics over them.
I can give you actually a very good example. There is an instrumental version of, I believe it's the song "I'm the One" off Van Halen. If you go on YouTube and listen to that, the instrumental by itself totally keeps your attention. He's doing all fills and stuff that you don't even hear because David Lee Roth is singing over it. If you ever get a chance, go back and listen to that. He's doing all interesting guitar stuff that you don't really hear because of the vocals over
because
it.
of the vocals. And there's no doubt, I think it would have done well. It wouldn't have, I don't think Warner Brothers would have felt that it was going to be a multi-platinum selling album. I get it, but it would have been for him just to do it. And for his diehard hardcore fans, would have been awesome. It would have been awesome.
Wouldn't you agree that it would have been better than also, and I'm not saying this as a joke, it would have been better than Van Halen 3, right?
Yeah, I mean, people used to ask him, "How come you don't do a solo album?" And he would always say, "This is really my solo album. This is
Yeah,
my music. So why would I bother doing anything else?"
right.
But there's a song called Pleasure Dome off of For Unlawful Carnal Knowledge. That's the one song where it doesn't, it should have just been an instrumental. It sounds like he had some difficulty trying to come up with the vocals on that one.
Okay.
And if you give that one a listen, I think you'll find that to be the case. But yeah, it's just one of those things. Or maybe there's stuff in the vaults. Maybe there is
Right.
stuff in there that we'll eventually hear. I don't know.
Yeah. I actually asked, I interviewed Wolfgang Van Halen a few months back for, I believe, the All Music site. And I asked him about if there's any updates with going through the vaults. And he said something to the effect of, don't hold your breath.
Yes, you're one of the
Yeah.
few that I think of the last year that even asked it, because I think a lot of reporters kind of gave up on it. So credit to you,
Yeah.
man. You asked it, and we put that up on the Van Halen news desk.
Oh,
And
yeah.
he,
Yeah.
yeah, he
Yeah.
said, "Don't hold your breath." I mean, he basically, I think he told you too. It's up to Alex at this point. I think
Yeah.
Alex is the one who's really is going to make the calls. 10 Led Zeppelin songs that prove Robert Plant is a golden god. Some of Zeppelin's most famous songs on here. But I do like seeing one like In My Time of Dying. That's number 10. What stands
Yeah.
out to you about his vocals on that particular track? Like, why did you include that one? So many you could put in there.
No, I mean, his
You mentioned
vocals on
there's
the
one
track
part.
runs the gamut from singing to screaming. There's like blues, soul, rock. I mean, just he is I mean, he's definitely in the top five rock vocalists of all time, as far as talent goes. There's very few. Really, him and Freddie, and if you want to include Ronnie James Dio, Halford, like those guys, I can't really think of too many other, as far as like technically, or singers that could sing a wide variety of styles as well.
And I think,
You know.
don't you mention at the end, "Oh my Jesus.
Oh
Oh
yes,
my
yeah, yeah,
Je-"
exactly. And then of course he also coughs at the end.
I love
Every
that stuff.
yeah,
I
yeah,
love that stuff.
yeah,
That's the stuff that's missing from the music nowadays too, is
yeah.
just that leave the mistakes in. What's the one where maybe that's the one. It's in the beginning where you hear the airplane flying overhead and you hear
Oh,
Robert go.
that's
He
it's
goes,
on Fizzle Graffiti. I forget the name. Is it Black Country Woman?
I
Maybe.
think so. And you go and you hear him
Yeah,
go, "No, leave it."
yeah, yeah.
The Booked on Rock podcast will be back after this. 10 times Lemmy was the coolest man on earth. Please share with us one of these if you can. If you need help, I can look it
Well,
up.
I'm trying to think. Yeah, because honestly, a lot of these lists I did like years ago.
That's
so
it.
I
Yeah.
forget
Let me
which,
see. Here we
yeah.
go. We'll pick okay, let me
Oh,
just pick one and maybe it'll
okay, good, good.
trigger
I
your
was going to
memory.
guess what one maybe, but it's probably better if you just tell me what.
Okay. What's crashing through a wall?
Oh, okay. That's the one I was going to say. There's a Motorhead video called "Killed by Death." And one thing about Motorhead with like that video is, unlike a lot of 80s metal videos, they had a bit of a sense of humor sometimes, Motorhead, such as with that. There's the video is like that there's a love interest of Lemmy's, and I think is that the woman's parents don't like Lemmy or something, and there's a scene where a motorcyclist crashes through a wall and picks up the girl, and it's Lemmy on the motorcycle in the house, but it's obviously not him going through the wall. But yeah, it's not really Lemmy crashing through the wall, but we'll just say it was him crashing through the wall.
Yeah. Serving as a roadie for Jimi Hendrix is that's great. I mean, that is
Yes,
just
that
so
is great.
cool.
I was lucky to interview Lemmy a few times over the years, and I told him once, I said, you're one of the few people I could say that you knew Jimi Hendrix and also Sid Vicious.
Yes.
Because yeah, he used to I think sell Sid Vicious either drugs or something like that. He was telling me, and then I've also heard rumors that he may have also sold Jimi Hendrix some kind of drugs as well. So
You talk about there's a guy who died with his boots on, man. He
yeah, I
just
know.
played until
Yeah,
he couldn't play anymore.
yeah, I know. Yeah.
10 moments that show the awesomeness of Neil Peart.
Yes.
You note the one aspect of Peart that is often overlooked because he was such an amazing drummer. That's his lyrics, which is so true. If you had to pick a favorite song lyrically by Neil, what would it be?
Without a doubt, the song called "Losing It," which people tend to not know what
Yes.
the hell song that is, but it's from
Love that song.
Signals.
Yes.
Yeah, the lyrics are fantastic. Yeah, I mean, I know like that. For instance, there was the Great Rush documentary that came out a few years back. What Beyond the Lighted Stage, I think it's called.
Yeah, I think our
And
friend Martin Popoff was a part of that
yes,
one, wasn't he?
and there's a little part in it where they kind of goof on Neil Peart's. It's funny is I'm just going to make a little slight detour. for decades, people called him Neil Peart. And then somehow along the way, I think Geddy Lee in concert referred to him as Neil Peart. Now everyone is saying Neil
I'm going with Peart. I don't know.
Peart. I used to pronounce it Peart like the shampoo.
Peart
Peart.
shampoo.
But yeah, the point being, yeah, I mean, some of the early Rush lyrics get to be, he was still kind of finding his way, but by the time we get to Signals, he's really come into his own. I mean, I was thinking yesterday, the lyrics to the song Tom Sawyer is fantastic, but the song called Losing It, it's about just getting old and what happens. I think it was inspired by, I believe, Hemingway and how he committed suicide.
Okay, but
And
also
yeah,
I think it's about a
thing about
dancer
also
too, getting older who
yeah,
can't
there's ballerina, and
ballerina.
there's also a thing about a writer. I think the writer part is a nod to actually Hemingway. I think
Yeah. Yeah.
I could be wrong,
Did
but yeah,
you?
but lyrically, it's great. I have to admit that it is kind of a depressing song,
Yeah.
but it's fan. And also
Powerful.
the electric violin solo is great in that.
It's beautiful.
Yeah,
Did you hear I wrote a blog on this on my website, bookedonrock.com, and I talked about how Geddy Lee was interviewed recently saying right after Neil died, he's
Mhm.
getting messages from people saying, "Hey man, you need a drummer." And like Geddy's just
Yeah. I
like,
don't know.
dude,
That is pretty. Actually,
what the
would you believe
fuck?
would you believe I just interviewed? Here, I'll show you a picture of someone that I just interviewed recently.
It's like
Give
just,
me 1 second, I'm sorry.
have some compassion,
I know.
give it a couple weeks at least. So like that's what Geddy was saying. Oh, you got Alex Lifeson?
Yep. I
Oh,
interviewed Alex Lifeson for the website called Ultimate Guitar. It's going to be running very, very shortly.
video. Video
Video.
interview. Oh, sweet. So what were the any questions that you can tell us Did you ask about are
Uh,
you going to get back together?
yeah. Well, the basis for the interview was he has a brand new amp series coming out. So I
Okay.
asked questions about that, but they did say towards the end of the interview, you can ask a few questions about Rush, which I did,
Okay.
which I just wouldn't want to give away at this point. But
To
no,
be
but there
continued.
is some very cool Rush stuff in there and he gave some really thoughtful answers of things I never heard him talk about. I mean, like some things he's talked about, but there is definitely some cool, interesting stuff in there
All right.
coming up
My
soon.
favorite chapter in your book, 5 overlooked Kiss album tracks, because I feel there is much more to Kiss.
I could tell you the one that I like the most,
Okay.
Mr. Speed,
Oh,
Rock and
cool.
Roll Over.
Great. Yeah,
My
great choice.
favorite. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm a huge fan of their music. To me, they're much more than the show. I don't know.
Yeah, no, I
Eh,
always, in fact, I once into, I'm going to keep on tooting my own horn that I once interviewed Paul Stanley and I told him that, as a Kiss fan, it kind of rubbed me the wrong way how everyone always focuses on the show and the makeup and the costumes. I thought that Kiss wrote some really great songs and are underrated players and everything, but I think he
Yeah,
kind
it's
of,
true.
yeah, I think he kind of understood what I was saying when I said
Cool.
that.
Strange Ways from 74 is Hotter Than Hell, which is a great choice.
That's probably one of Ace Frehley's best solos.
I think
The
I'd
end of
switch
Strange
it
Ways.
out though with Parasite from
Parasite's
that
great too,
album.
yeah. There's
But
also a song off Love Gun called Almost Human that has a great
oh,
backwards Jimi Hendrix type solo that he does.
yes. And Gene's vocals, I think he's underrated as a vocalist too. He's just got a great
Yeah,
sound to his vocals. One from the non-makeup years, Not for the Innocent from 83's Lick It
yes.
Up. Can't argue with that one. I do have one from the non-makeup years, Silver Spoon from
Okay.
89's Hot in the Shade, I would say. And King of
Okay.
Hearts. King of Hearts, not far behind that.
Okay.
Those are some good ones. Trimming it down to 5 is not easy.
Yeah, it's kind of hard.
Yeah. Winding down, top 10 musical oddities. Number 4, Crispin Hellion Glover, The Big
Yes.
Problem, The Solution. The Solution, Let It Be from
Yeah.
1989. This is the
Yes.
Back to the Future
Yes, I was
Crispin
going to say this
Glover.
is of course Crispin Glover front he is
Fam-
Mr. McFly.
what the hell is this album? I listened a
Uh
little bit. It's like a
yeah,
spoken
it's like a
word
very
thing,
odd. He was obviously trying to be very, very wacky and nutty, and
avant-garde.
it's yeah. There's spoken word stuff. There's just maniacal singing and weird stuff. It's worth a listen, but it's not the type of thing you want to put on like at a party.
Yeah, it is odd. It's on YouTube if anybody wants to give it a listen. I think it's on Spotify too. If it is, I'll
I think it is. I
put
think
some
it is.
songs on the show notes page. I'll put a link up there. All right, so let's finish up with the list that I asked you to come up with, and I have my own 10 albums Greg Prato, Cannot Live Without. You
That's
have,
to interrupt. Of course, as soon as I sent you that list, I automatically thought about another five more I
yeah.
should have added. So, yeah.
All right. Do you have the list in front of you, or shall I read it?
I don't have that list
for
in
you?
front of me, so if you just want to, we can go one by one, and I'll
There you
just
go.
tell you a few sentences for each.
Yeah. Now
If
you didn't. I don't think you ranked them 10-1, right? Or they
I
just kind
didn't,
of.
yeah, I could tell you that the one album I would feel comfortable putting at number one. Should I just start off with that one,
Yeah.
or
Which one?
all right, Blind Melon Soup?
Nice. Number
We've
one.
talked a lot about that. That's an album that I don't know, like part of me is always like I'm always like a dark horse type of guy when it comes to movies and music and stuff like that. A lot of people look at Blind Melon as a one-hit wonder, and they think, they didn't really dig deeper because sadly Shannon Hoon died too young. But their second album is an album, Soup, it's called, came out in 1995. It's an album that I could listen. I've been listening to it pretty steadily since 1995, and I never get sick of it. And just, yeah, it was just a work of art. And I know
The
from the
most
past,
underrated band to come out of the
yes,
90s.
I agree. So that one I would say just, I know that there's been a lot of other albums that have been more influential and have sold more, but that to me is just Greg Prato's number one
That's Greg Prato's
album.
number
But
one,
I
ladies and
actually
gentlemen.
remember some of the ones. I also went with Queen 2 was also on there, right?
That's in there.
Queen 2 because that's again another dark horse type thing that's probably one of Queen's lesser known albums. That and probably Hot Space are they're probably two lesser known and also least selling albums, but it's like their most heavy, darkest, proggy, fucked up sounding album. Similar to Blind Melon Soup and Queen 2, it's an album you could listen to from start to finish. It's a whole entire work of art type
What were
thing.
the
And also
singles from there?
Seven Seas of Rye.
Oh, okay. Which is
Yeah,
a
but then
freaking
there's like
great
there's
song.
great songs. Like I love the song called Father to Son.
Yes, that's a
That
great.
yeah,
That's a Brian May lead
that's a
vocal
Brian
song.
May song. There's also a song called Ogre Battle, which
Yep.
Paul Di'Anno of Iron Maiden once told me he thinks that is the first ever thrash metal song.
Wow. Okay.
And that was written totally by Freddie Mercury. So that's what makes Queen such a fantastic band is they offered us a huge, I mean, think of Freddie Mercury writing their heaviest song, Over Battle, then also writing Crazy Little Thing Called Love and writing the disco-y parts of Hot Space like Body Language. And it's he definitely covered a huge, and of course, gospel with Somebody to Love. That's what makes Freddie Mercury such a force to be reckoned with artistically.
Most
And then,
versatile band in rock too. Songwriting. All four guys, each of them had a number one single
yeah,
on
yeah,
one chart or another.
right. And then from that on, if you want to start naming the albums, because I kind of forget which ones.
Yeah, let's see. You got Soundgarden, Super Unknown.
Yeah, I always go between Super Unknown and also Bad Motorfinger. But yeah, so really it depends on the day. I alternate between those two. But Bad Motorfinger, I like the sound, I think production of it more.
Yeah, I tried to
It's
ask myself,
more
like,
full.
what if there's an album that you just couldn't live without? Like, if somebody said to you, you can never listen to this again. That's kind of the mindset I went into going with this list. Meat Puppets, Up on the Sun.
Yes, a lot of people would go with Meat Puppets 2, and their best-selling album is the one called Too High to Die, which is a great album, which
Yeah.
I later did a book with the Meat Puppets, and I borrowed that title. It's called Too High to Die, Meet the Meat Puppets.
Oh, cool. That
That's
has
called.
Backwater.
Yeah, that was yes, yeah.
That
is
was
back.
the hit. Yeah. Van
And
Halen, Fair Warning.
yes, Van Halen, Fair Warning. Yeah, yeah. I mean, of course, I was tempted to go with the first Van Halen, but I figured why not go with one that is the more uncommon selection. So I went with Fair Warning because that's just I love the I don't know I tend to like dark albums, like dark sounding albums, whether it be Queen 2 or Fair Warning or Blind Melon Soup definitely has its dark moments.
You're right.
Yeah.
Devo, Freedom of Choice. That's an interesting one.
Devo is one of my all-time favorite bands. Again, similar to Kiss. A lot of people can't look past the whole flower pot thing and their zany outfits, but a lot of their lyrics are very, very thought-provoking, and they also have a sense of humor, which is great about what they did. Very visually stimulating, especially for that time. Groundbreaking when it comes to also music video. They're one of the first bands to do interesting music videos. But yeah, that album though, Freedom of Choice, that has the song "Whip It," which everyone knows. My two favorite Devo songs are the title track from Freedom of Choice, which is great, and also "Girl You Want," which Soundgarden later did a fantastic cover of.
Thin Lizzy, Live and Dangerous. Is this the one with Huey Lewis?
Yes, yes, it is. Yes,
Oh, I love
that
it.
is it. Yeah, he comes out and he plays harmonica on a song called Baby Drives Me Crazy, but
He
Thin
was in a
Lizzy,
band called Clover. I think they
Clover,
were opening for
Clover.
Thin Lizzy.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I actually interviewed again, I'll just keep tooting my horn. I interviewed Huey Lewis a few months
Ah,
back,
that's
I believe, for
cool.
Songfacts, and I
How's he
asked him about
doing? Is
he's doing
he?
good, but sadly, I don't know if he can perform anymore though because of his hearing
Yeah, I was
loss.
hoping maybe
Like,
he
I
was
don't
going to
know.
give you some good news on that front.
Yeah, no, it seems like he says without his hearing aids, he's totally deaf. Yeah, but
Yeah.
in fact, he said he was doing the interview with me because he has a hearing aid that has a Bluetooth connection in it. So he's
Yeah,
doing the interview. He could hear me in his hearing aid through Zoom or whatever. That's how we were doing the interview.
man.
But just to get back quickly to
Yeah,
the
did
Thin
that Thin
Lizzy
Lizzy
album,
album.
the live renditions of a lot of those classic tracks, I think, are better than the studio ones. And I just want to quickly jump back to Meat Puppets Up on the Sun for people that aren't that familiar with that. It came out in 1985, and it's a very unique sounding album. It's like very psychedelic sounding. There's clean guitar, but it's like psychedelic Hendrixy type weird stuff. I think they did that. They may have done that album while high on LSD. I could be wrong though, or
Wow.
possibly acid, one of those drugs. But it's fantastic. Kurt Kirkwood is a highly underrated guitarist, very original, was a huge influence on a lot of the grunge bands like Soundgarden and Nirvana. The only thing I will warn you about that album is, as a vocalist, he kind of warbles in and off of key, but that never stopped David Lee Roth, right?
It never did. It never
So,
did.
so there you go.
And now you got me thinking, maybe I should do a podcast episode while on LSD.
Yeah.
Have you ever written an article while on
No,
LSD?
no. I...
Kids, don't try this at home.
Yeah.
King's X, Gretchen Goes to Nebraska.
Yeah, one of the most underrated bands of all time. I did a book of them, King's X, called King's X: The Oral History, which came out a few years back. Yeah, that was an album came out in 1989, very original. 1989 was just when hair metal was phasing out and we were turning into alternative and grunge and everything. And that album really sounded like nothing else at the time. It's soulful, it has Beatles elements, it has prog elements, heavy elements, acoustic elements. If you're not familiar with that album, give it a listen. The production is maybe a touch dated, but it's still great songwriting, great playing. I think if you're not familiar with it, definitely listen to it.
Jimi Hendrix, Axis Bold as Love.
Again, the obvious selection is probably Are You Experienced, but Axis Bold as Love is just a very interesting sounding album. Once interviewed Steve Vai, and he said that he picked up his whole chord vocabulary by listening to that album. And if you listen to that and listen to a Steve Vai song such as Sisters, you can definitely connect the dots between a lot of like octaves and clean guitar, very interesting guitar tones. And again, I don't think there's really a true hit song on that album. Probably like Little Wing is the best known song. I think on the first Jimi Hendrix album I ever had was Smash Hits. I don't think there was one single song off of Axis Bold as Love on that best of album, but fantastic album.
The Pretenders, their
Yes.
self-titled debut, I'm assuming. That's the first album.
Yes. One of the most underrated guitarists of all time is James Honeyman Scott. Very, very interesting guitar style.
The late great.
Yes, late great. One of my favorite guitar solos of all time is on the song called "Tattooed Love Boys." He has a break, a right in the middle of a guitar solo that's fantastic. It's almost like a David Gilmour type thing where he's giving you like a phrase stops. He's giving you almost like phrase that are like easily to digest, kind of. So if you're not familiar with
Cool.
that, listen to that song, "Tattooed Love Boys." That's a great song. And also Chrissy Hynde is a underrated lyricist, and I think she's a great artist overall. So I give her nothing but praise.
Yeah, I'm a Pretenders hits fan, so I know all the songs from on the radio and the
Right.
best of and all that stuff. So I should really listen to some
I,
more of the
I
Pretenders. I'll start
reviewed
with
their
that one.
latest album. Like I reviewed their latest album, and I kind of drop off after their first two albums, but their latest album was surprisingly strong.
Okay,
I have to give them credit for that.
cool. Now you have an
Yeah.
honorable mention because that's 10, but you did add
Yeah.
one for good luck, which is AC/DC, Dirty Deeds Done Dirt Cheap.
Yeah, because Bon Scott, if I have to go with my top three vocalists of all time, I gotta go with Freddie, Chris Cornell, and Bon Scott are probably my top three. There's something just special, unique about yeah, I was thinking so crazy. Think about the late 70s and especially early 80s, all the great bands. You had AC/DC with Bon Scott. You had Van Halen with David Lee Roth. And then
Whoa.
you had albums coming out that like are kind of forgotten, like Billy Squier, Don't Say No. That
Yeah.
album is absolutely phenomenal. If you go back and listen to that, the Cars' first album was phenomenal.
Oh, it's like the
You have
greatest
Cheap
hits.
Trick. Yeah, you have Cheap Trick at Budokan. It's one of the greatest live albums. But let me just quickly throw out some albums that I could not fit on the list. We have Faith No More, Angel Dust. I wish could have been on that list.
Midlife
Mar-
crisis.
Mark Lanigan Bubblegum is a great album. Could have been on that list. Cheap Trick at Budokan, I would have loved to have added to that list.
That's
Albums,
14.
yes.
He
There's just
cheated.
so many albums you could have. I could have added Kiss Alive. Yeah,
Oh
I mean,
yeah.
the just keeps going and going the list.
Well, that's the thing that made it hard for me is some of these bands, there's a few bands that I could just pick so many, but I just picked just one. So here's my top 10.
What is your favorite Van Halen album? Go ahead. Start with that.
Yeah, my personal
Just one.
if I had to pick just one, which is on the list here, it's
Okay.
got to be 1984.
Okay.
I mean, if I had to
that's
just
also the
pick
first-
one,
yeah.
because there's a connection to it. Personally, it's the first Van Halen song I ever heard was Jump. I remember seeing the video like it was yesterday. I can even see
Right.
it in my head, being in the living room, 12 years old.
Right.
And then finally hearing the whole album and just being blown away by it.
Right.
And then years later, listening to it, going back and listening to it again when I became like a real, so it would have been like in 88, 89, I started to just
Okay.
invest all of my time into Van Halen. Each week I would take the money I got from my part-time job and buy another
All right.
album or cassette.
Yeah. Right.
And when I listened to 1984, including those two badass tunes, House of Pain and Girl Gone Bad, it was like, okay, this shit is awesome. So I have to go with that one, even though I've said the story a zillion times. 5150 is the album that turned me on to Van Halen, but 1984 is just, that's the band just to me on all cylinders. And it's a short album. It's not,
Yep.
It's not a long
A
album.
lot of their albums are short. Isn't like Van Halen 2 barely over 30 minutes long?
Right.
Yeah.
And surprising, because Van Halen's my favorite band, it's not number one on my list. So I'll go
Okay.
10-1.
Good.
So we start at number 10, U2 Joshua Tree.
Okay.
Okay. I actually bought that at Strawberries with a gift certificate, Christmas gift. And I got that one, Tattoo You. And there was a third one in there, but those are the two that I remember most. And Joshua Tree is, to me, perfect.
Okay.
Pearl Jam 10. That's
Oh,
number
there
9.
you go.
Yep. And I could have picked Nirvana's Nevermind, but
That's an album I could have put into you.
right. But
Yeah.
at that period, I gravitated more towards Pearl Jam.
Uh-huh.
I'm still such a huge fan. I love Nirvana, but it was 10 that kind of got my attention first.
Right. Okay.
The Police, Ghost in the Machine.
Okay. Yeah, I love Zenyatta Mandata is probably my favorite.
There isn't
yeah.
one bad album that they made. Not
I
one.
agree.
So that's
I
why it was
agree.
hard to pick. But this one, just like you were saying, it's a little dark. It's got a dark edge to it.
Yep.
Speaking of Tattoo You, that I put as number 7, the Rolling Stones,
Okay.
Tattoo You. It's not
Okay.
a lot of the Stones fans that say it's not an official album because it was kind of like recycled songs, but whatever. It's awesome.
Right.
Again, going back to the dark theme, The Cure, Disintegration, number 6. Are you a Cure
Okay.
fan at all?
You know, it's a band that I have a lot of respect for. My wife is a huge Cure fan, and she'll
Cool.
play me stuff, and I'm like, yeah, this is actually pretty interesting. And I always mean to go back and listen to them, but I have yet to. Them and also Depeche Mode are two bands that I'll hear stuff there. I'm like, oh, this actually sounds pretty good. But back in the '80s, I was knee deep in heavy metal, so I didn't really listen to.
Yeah, Disintegration is their masterpiece, and it was like 91. My roommate was a big alternative rock fan. He played the CD for me, and I was like mesmerized. So that's a must. Number 5, AC/DC, Back in Black. Do I even need to explain why?
Yeah, that's a perfect
I
album.
mean,
pretty
it's
much.
perfect.
Yeah.
Now, Martin Popoff's not going to be happy with this choice. Def Leppard, Hysteria.
Ah,
Martin's famously known for panning that album, but I
Okay.
think it's fucking awesome. I love it. It's pop rock perfection.
yeah.
I love the production, just the sound that is the 80s rock sound. I just love it.
Do you agree that the Kiss song "Read My Body" is a shameless ripoff of "Pour Some Sugar on
Oh,
Me"?
hell yeah. Oh, of course. That's one of the worst Kiss songs ever. But we're getting to Kiss. We're getting to Kiss next, number 3 on the list. And now I could have gone with Alive because I know I get it. That's such a huge album. But Alive 2, for me, I love. Not only do I love the songs on it, but there's a story behind it. When I was 7, I think, maybe 7 years old. This is like 79. A friend of mine who lived on the street was a huge fan. And from what I recall, and he had all the albums, and I think he just kind of played them so much and they got so beat down, he just replaced them with a whole new set. So he said, here you go. And he handed me a stack of Kiss albums. And on top was Alive 2. And you open that gatefold, and that's that. You see the stage with the fire and all that, which you hear later was not, it was a stage. But whatever. All the fire and the sparks going off. And then you got the pictures of Gene with he's all sweaty with the blood coming down. So Alive 2 and Rocket Ride's on there. Larger Than Life. I think you have that as one of your songs in the book on the unknown Kiss tracks. Might be.
I think so. Yeah. I'm pretty sure. I'm pretty sure.
All American Man is on that.
Yeah.
So those studio tracks are awesome. And then I have Van Halen 1984. Okay, number 1. The one album that I could not live without, Dark Side of the Moon.
Oh, interesting.
Dark Side of the Moon.
That is a great one. Although I got to tell you, I may be more of a Wall guy. What do you think of that?
Yeah, for some reason, I don't get burned out on Dark Side of the Moon songs, but I've gotten Comfortably Numb, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah. It's true.
I'm like hell, but I just, Dark Side of the Moon is because it's universally, we can all relate to it.
Yeah.
Feeling of going mad, money, time, all that stuff.
That's true.
So there you go.
Well, I think that was a very strong list you put together.
Solid list.
There you go.
So let's promote. Let's plug a website. You don't have an official website, but you have.
Not official.
You're on social
Twitter.
media. Yeah.
Yeah, you go to Twitter, which is is it called X or is it called Twitter
it's
at this
point? X.
So
I got to keep remembering that.
Yeah, so it's either x.com/Greg Prato Writer, or you can, I still type in Twitter, so twitter.com/Greg Prato Writer. You also go to my good old Instagram page, which is also Greg Prato Writer. Or you can go to Amazon, look up my books, just look up Greg Prato, and you will find all my books there. But Twitter, I put all my latest interviews. I'm always doing interviews for a wide variety of sites and also magazines. So I'd say Twitter is the place. And I have a Linktree link on my Twitter page. Which
that's the Linktree is a really good one. That's got everything.
So
there.
if you click on the Linktree thing, it'll take you to where to buy my books and also my past articles and stuff. So
what can we expect this year, 2024? Books?
I have some projects coming up. One book, I don't want to give it away too much, but I have a book coming out in the next month or two, which is about a specific hair metal band of the 80s.
Oh, I think you told me about this.
I may have mentioned it, but I want to keep it hush hush so I don't spoil a surprise if people didn't hear it on the previous. But I think it is a book you will want to probably discuss when it comes out. And then I also have I may have come up with my next big project book, which is still kind of in the planning stages. I don't want to say too much about it because sometimes I've done books which then other similar books have come out by other writers. I don't think that they necessarily rip me off, but just something in the universe lined up and suddenly, Okay. So I'm a little bit paranoid, so I just don't want to give it away. But it is a pretty good idea of a style. It's a genre of music that's kind of almost forgotten at this point, which I've been listening to it recently, and I think it's some of the best rock music of all time. So
you did a yacht rock book.
I did, and I also did a grunge book.
What could it be? Because
you've been such a supporter of me, I'm just going to tell you right now.
Okay.
It's a book of the best times people on sports teams or any kind of player on a sports team did music.
Oh, my God. I thought you were saying, because I was going to say, like, Huey Lewis had the guys from the 49ers. Hey, you could have. I
was thinking about like Super Bowl Shuffle.
The Bears, the 85 Bears.
No, I'm just kidding now. But it is
seller.
a style of music that I just can't give away much more than that. But
right.
It is sincerely a style of music I've been listening to lately that hopefully by doing this book, maybe it'll bring a little more attention to this type of music. Is all I'm saying.
Greg Prato, thanks for being on. This is great, man. I think we covered a lot of.
We did
a lot of ground.
Yes.
Awesome.
Thank you, Eric.
That was an adventure.
That was quite a show you put on today.
Well, let me just close this conversation by saying you are one unique individual.